I only knew my mother for 15 years. She fought cancer from when I was in the 7th grade until I was in 10th, and then she died. She died before I had a chance to vent all that adolescent rage. While most of my friends were trying to prove that they weren't mama's boys, I missed my mom. So my visions of my mother are pretty idyllic, arrested at the stage where I still believed that she was pretty wonderful. I did not go through the stage of being angry with her for being less than perfect, nor did I have the benefit of talking to her adult to adult and be reconciled to who she really was. Yet she lives on in me. Sometimes I'm surprised by anniversaries, like when I turned 30 and realized that I had lived as long without her as I had with her. When I turned 35, the age she was when she had me. And this year, my sister turns 50, the age my mother was when she died. Her memory grows more distant, but there are indelible lessons that are impossible for me to unlearn. And I want to share with you this morning some of the things I learned from my mother. And while I do, I want you to think of some of the things you learned from your mother, and if you feel comfortable to share them after the sermon. The first thing my mother taught me was to appreciate other people, particularly my 2 sisters and brother. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and when we would squabble, my mother would say, "I was an only child for 11 years, and it was 15 years before I had a sister. You kids should appreciate each other." By the time I came along, my older siblings were so tired of it that all she had to do is start the sentence and they would finish it. And eventually we made a deal with her. If she said it one more time, we'd get a nickel. So if we would fight, she'd start to repeat herself, "I was an only child," and we'd yell, "Nickel, nickel." And we thought we were getting over on her, but she only had to pay us a nickel to get us to stop fighting. Another thing she said very often was, "It takes all kinds to make this world." And usually this was said with a sigh. Usually when she was angry at someone, it was a phrase she said to herself to remind herself to be forgiving. It takes all kinds to make this world. But there is a deeper notion to this phrase. We lived in northern Michigan, and there were no black people in my county, the county below us, and the county to the west of us. The lake was in the east of us. We didn't see black people very much. But I remember going down to visit my grandma Davis, who lived in suburban Detroit, and she was worried about the coloreds that were moving into her neighborhood. And my mother told me, "Pay no attention to Grandma Davis, she's wrong." And at 5 years old, it was the first time I remember being told that an adult could be wrong. And it left an impression on me. But alas, my mom wasn't always politically correct. In 1963, for Halloween, her bowling team dressed as an interracial family, shades of things to come, But being an all-white county, one dressed as an Indian and one dressed as a Mexican and so forth, and my mother put on blackface. We had a grocery store along the highway on the outskirts of town, and a week later, a tourist came into the store, and I saw in real life at 3 years old my first black woman. Being curious, I walked up to her, ran my finger down the back of her leg, stared at my finger and said, "It doesn't come off." My dad turned paler white than he already was, preparing for the angry outburst from his customer, who just laughed and said, "No, it doesn't, sugar." Later in the 60s, my oldest sister brought black men home from college to meet the family, and my mother reacted by buying lots of books saying, "I need to learn more about this." She knew that it takes all kinds to make this world. And it saddens me that she never got to meet Gail, my wife, or that she ever got a chance to meet Ben, because I know she would have loved Ben, because the second thing my mother taught me is that it's important to play. It's important to stay young at heart. And she had me when she was 35, and so she was older than all my friends' moms. Yet they were surprised because she seemed so young. Other friends' moms would sit on the beach or not even come to the beach. But my mother would be in the waves, throwing the ball, making diving catches. She took all four of us to see the Beatles in 1965. And then one Christmas, when we kids were about 10, 13, 16, and 20, she bought the family a strange gift. I'm sure you might have seen one of these, a red and blue toddler ball with little yellow shapes that fit in the holes. And we looked at her and we scolded her, for I was 10 and I was the youngest, and she had bought us this baby toy. And she said, "I just thought it would be fun to see how fast we could do it." And for the rest of the holiday season, you had a family engrossed in competitive toddler ball. And I don't remember any other presents I got that Christmas. My mother was very religious. She took us to the Presbyterian church, and she taught me that Christianity was about love. And she would often say, "Don't hate people, hate their wicked ways." In fact, she encouraged us. She said, "When you're angry, don't say 'I hate you,' say 'I hate your wicked ways.'" Now, I know none of us kids ever followed this advice because it was such a nerdy thing to say. But underneath that nerdiness, there's a meaning that I have carried with me as I've journeyed into Unitarian Universalism. Every person has inherent worth and dignity. We may not like what some people do, but that does not give us permission to hate them. It's important whenever we are angry to separate the sinner from the sin. You may hate the sin, but you must love the sinner. Dislike the behavior, but not the person. So if we are ever in a heated debate in a committee meeting, and I say, "I hate your wicked ways," know that that's my mother keeping me from saying something meaner. And even though my mother was very religious, she taught me that religion was a choice. When my brother was in 8th grade, as the Presbyterian tradition, it was time to be confirmed and join the church. And my brother said that he did not believe the vows that he was required to say. And I imagine this was quite an embarrassment for my mother, who was a pillar of the church. Because most kids joined the church because their mothers made them. I knew my brother's friends, and they were no more religious than him. But they just went along with the program and mouthed the words. But my mother told my brother that she was proud of him for being honest. So 3 years later, when I joined the church, I knew I was making a real choice, a choice that was mine and not my mother's. And the last thing that my mother taught me was that dying is okay. I remember the miracle of her last Christmas. She was very ill. Chemotherapy was taking its toll and not helping. And Dad had told all the relatives not to visit because she was so tired. Of course, this resulted in everybody coming to visit her before she died. And because there were guests in the home, my mother perked up and lifted everybody's spirit that Christmas. And then after the holidays, there was a steady decline to her death. And I remember one February afternoon, her best friend was coming to visit. And I always loved to be in the room when Audrey and Mom talked. It was phenomenal. They just talked and talked so fast from topic to topic. And I'm not a shy person, and I couldn't get in edgewise. I just sat back and watched in awe. But this afternoon, my mom said, well, Audrey's coming over, but I don't want you to be in the room. She says, Audrey's been reading about faith healing. I don't think I believe in it, but she wants to give it a try. My mother was a nurse. She knew the reality of her situation, but it was more important to her to give her friend this afternoon, not for her own healing, but to accept the gift that her friend needed to give. One night we got news from the hospital that she was probably not going to make it. And I prayed as hard as I could. I read the Bible and cried until I had a religious experience. At the time, I described it as it felt like God gave me a hug. And now that I've gone to college, been trained in psychology and social work, I would call it a cathartic release. But whatever it was, I felt overwhelming calm. I knew things would be all right. My mother survived that night, and I got to see her the next day. And when she died the day after, I knew that dying was okay. Over the next few years, I saw my friends struggle to break free from their mothers, and I realized I was lucky. I will always have my perfect mother. I know she was human, and I saw my older siblings rebel against her, but my personal memories are pleasant. I've seen my peers worry about their aging parents and experience the pain of role reversal. And that's why Mother's Day can be such a difficult holiday. Because Mother's Day does not honor real moms, it honors the mythical perfect mother. Greeting cards contain poetry with more sugar than Mom's apple pie. Norman Rockwell's image of the mother comes to mind. She's pretty, but not sexy. Cooking delicious food. The house is clean. She smiles as she picks up our socks. She forgives our every sin. She picks us up each time we fall, puts a Band-Aid on our knee and kisses it to start the healing process. She loves all her children equally and is always willing to drive them anywhere and give them money. She never thinks of herself, only her family. Our society gives mothers two options: be perfect or be considered a bad mother. Men who buy into the belief of the perfect mother become resentful and readily accept psychoanalytic theory that blames everything on their mother. Mothers who believe in the perfect mother will be crippled with guilt for not being able to live up to it. The perfect mother is an image that men love, but it's not an image that they respect. To be called a mama's boy is an insult, suggesting that you actually listen to your mother's advice. Thus, you are immature and powerless. That's why, in a male-dominated world, you look to God the Father all-powerful. See, God the Father is always right because might makes right. God the Father leads us forward into battle. He is judgmental and damning. Even his plan for forgiveness is brutal. He sends his Son to die. But ironically, while Jesus was living, he showed many qualities of the perfect mother. He was forgiving. He was able to heal. Plus, he was able to feed 5,000 and have leftovers. Jesus was declared to be God for living up to the minimum standards that we hold mothers to. After Jesus died, our church father stripped him of his feminine qualities and declared that he rose to sit on the right hand of God, being his right-hand man, to judge the quick and the dead. Jesus became one with God, and mothers have continued to be forced to be the suffering servant. Given all the responsibility of a God, but stripped of the rights and privileges. God the Father has all the rights and privileges. It's blasphemy to even suggest that God is responsible for evil in this world. Men who identify with God the Father abdicate responsibility for their action. They accept power without having to consider kindness. And women who accept the image of perfect mother accept the responsibility and guilt of God without exercising their inherent power. In return, they get free lunch and flowers once a year. And so it's easy to see why, in recent years, especially in our congregations, the image of goddess or God the Mother is helpful to some, because it is an image that uses her power to truly nurture. But when power and responsibility are both given to a deity, what is left for us humans? I feel humans should claim the power and responsibility for themselves. We need both. Without both, we can't be whole. Mothers who reject the role of suffering servants and affirm their power are able to be whole and teach their children to be whole. And the children will learn that the use of power without regard for others is unacceptable. Sons will no longer strive to emulate an all-powerful God, and they will find forgiveness and nurturing qualities within themselves that they have been taught to ignore. Gods and goddesses may be able to have perfect power and responsibility, but each of us, male or female, must learn to accept and use our limited power, knowing that we are not totally to blame for evil, yet we all have some responsibility and capacity to love, be kind, to nurture, and to forgive. So this day, think about your mother and love her as a real person. And remember, it takes all kinds to make this world. Love her even if you hate some of her wicked ways. I've been a motherless child since I was 15. You kids should appreciate your mothers. I think I owe you a nickel. But rather than paying you a nickel, I now ask you to put in your own 2 cents. What do the images of mother create in your mind? Who is that human being that was or is your mother, and what have you learned from her? And anyone who's brave enough to talk, make your mother proud.